Today we'll be looking at the anime Urusei Yatsura, a remake of a classic anime from the early 1980s. For those who don't know, the iconic main female character Lum is one of the first tsundere girls of many to come, a trope loved by so many anime fans to this day. Like this video if you remember watching the original, and enjoy this recap of the first 4 episodes of the brand new remake. It was just a regular day in London when the alien spaceship appeared above its skyline. They were like giant blimp-like ships with glowing lines and a tiger pattern. Soon, they were hovering above cities all around the world, and the people on Earth were rightfully concerned. In Japan, a pair of lovers has no idea about the impending alien invasion. Instead, Shinobu is screaming at her boyfriend, Ataru, about how he is looking at other girls too much, ogling their bodies when they're supposed to be dating. Shinobu storms off, leaving Ataru alone on the bridge. A passing old and short Buddhist monk notices his depressive state and tries to save him from jumping off the bridge, but he pushes him into the river instead. On their way back to Ataru's home, they are met by his mother and Shinobu again. But this isn't about their love anymore. The two women try to warn him of someone looking for him, but the men in black have already found him. They get into black unmarked vehicles and are taken to Ataru's home. In his living room is a giant man in a tiger print suit and horns, a demon. More accurately, he is the boss of the aliens that have come to Earth, and he begins explaining his plan to Ataru. The young man learns that he was picked at random out of all the people on Earth to play a game of tag with one of the aliens. If he wins by catching the alien by its devil horns, the entire fleet of alien ships will back off and leave Earth alone. But if he fails to do so, in 10 days' time, the aliens will proceed with their invasion. Ataru is confident that he can win a game as simple as tag, and he is introduced to the alien assigned to evading him for 10 days. The alien's name is Lum, and she looks like a cute girl with shiny blue hair and clothes that can only be described as a tiger print bikini. Ataru immediately promises to catch her, but he has a suspiciously pervy face as he says this, so Shinobu hits him, just to be sure. The next day arrives, and Ataru and Lum are ready for the beginning whistle. Ataru isn't taking the competition very seriously, because all he can think of is catching Lum by other things than her horns. The starting whistle resonates through the sports stadium. Ataru sprints at Lum, and just as he's about to lunge at her, she elegantly jumps into the air and stays there. It turns out Lum can fly. Ataru is very angry at this, thinking that the competition was going to be easy, but now he actually has to put in some work. Several days pass and Lum keeps evading Ataru and hiding from him, eating ice cream and sunbathing on tops of buildings where he can't find her, while Ataru gets no such break. By the 9th day, he is completely depressed and won't come out of his room. Down in the dining room, the Buddhist priest that knocked Ataru off a bridge at the start of the story is explaining to his parents that he knew Ataru was born under the star of misfortune as soon as he laid eyes on his dumb face. But his mother says she doesn't believe Ataru is unlucky. Ironically, she starts listing the weird circumstances of his birth, giving birth to him on Friday the 13th, which was an unlucky day in the Buddhist calendar that year, a black cat walking across the delivery room at that moment, and there was also an earthquake the next day. They give up on their optimism and conclude that the Earth is doomed, and that Ataru will spend the rest of his life an outcast for his failure to catch Lum by the horns. Up in Ataru's room, Shinobu is trying to talk to Ataru to motivate him, but he doesn't budge. He believes he will fail and will have to leave society, who will hate him and blame him for the alien invasion. Shinobu steals herself and promises to marry him if he wins on the last day. Ataru can't believe his ears, but Shinobu repeats herself, and her marriage proposal gives Ataru new energy. The last day of the competition begins back on the sports stadium, where Ataru keeps thinking of marrying Shinobu in order to motivate himself. The whistle is blown and he charges at Lum, first muttering and then screaming out loud about marriage. This freaks Lum out, and she is too slow at evading him, so Ataru manages to grab her ankle before she can fly out of reach. She suddenly generates electricity from her body, electrocuting Ataru, which makes him fly away to the other end of the stadium, but he manages to get himself up and charges again. This time, his screaming of marriage is even louder, which distracts Lum to the point where she realizes that Ataru has managed to snatch her bra during the scuffle. Now she has to charge at Ataru herself, and he manages to let her take her bra back while grabbing her by the horns, and the competition is done. The Earth has been saved from alien invasion, and Ataru is giving interviews on stage about what he plans to do with his fame. He is about to answer the question when Lum answers for him, saying he's about to get married, of course. Ataru is confused for a moment, which is when Lum announces that she will be staying on Earth after the aliens leave in order to marry Ataru. It turns out that Ataru's motivational screaming of marriage was misunderstood to be a marriage proposal to Lum, not a promise to Shinobu. Before he can correct Lum, Shinobu calls him a cheater and storms away. Over the next few days, Ataru tries to make things right with Shinobu, but before he can say anything meaningful over the phone, Lum intercepts the call from her alien spaceship in Earth's orbit. This triangular phone connection creates a black hole in the sky that makes aircraft disappear when trying to fly through it. So Ataru tries meeting with Shinobu in person during a deadly thunderstorm. Just as they are about to meet, Lum crashes her spaceship in the middle of the street, she herself landing on Ataru, which enrages Shinobu, making her run off in a huff. In a traditional Japanese temple, a boy with black slicked back hair is saying his farewells to his grandpa, for he is about to begin high school as a transfer student. After a teary farewell, he is informed that they are currently passing over Tomobiki High School, where he is transferring to, at which point he grabs his school bag, a backpack, and walks to the jumping ramp because it turns out that this huge temple and garden is within a giant airplane, and his mode of transport to school is by parachute. Just as he is passing the window of the upper floors of the school to land in the courtyard, he is hit by a desk that comes crashing through the window. The students gather around this strange new student, and Shinobu apologizes for throwing the desk because she was trying to throw it at Ataru for not breaking up with Lum. The transfer student named Mendo immediately begins flirting with Shinobu, which she likes, and when Ataru tries interfering, Shinobu blocks him from getting in the way. When Lum comes to check out what is happening, Mendo lands his eye on her as well, but she explains that she has promised to Ataru. That is when Mendo notices Ataru and is insulted by how dumb Ataru looks, considering that he has somehow caught such a cutie as Lem. After a few days of flirting with female students, Mendo is talked into running for class president. In his candidacy speech, he vows to eradicate the 3 greatest sins of students: lateness, lying in order to get out of school early, and staying home to lie around playing video games and reading manga instead of going to school. Any student caught committing any of these deeds would face punishment so harsh they would reconsider their life choices. This isn't popular with the male students, especially when Mendo clarifies that the harsh punishments would not apply to the female students. Enraged, the male students talk Ataru into running against Mendo to represent the male students. He is not the smartest one or the most popular, but he does seem like Mendo's natural nemesis. Instead of delivering convincing candidacy speech, Ataru only manages to say something dumb and pervy. But with the girls voting for Mendo and the boys voting for Ataru, their votes are perfectly tied. So Mendo challenges Ataru to a duel in which they attempt to shoot an apple off the opponent's head using a cannon. In order to formally challenge him to a duel, however, Mendo has to hit Ataru with a white glove, which Ataru dodges, and it turns into a whole chase scene. In the end, Mendo corners Ataru on a rooftop, and when he throws his last glove, Lum comes busting in, getting hit with the glove instead. Not really understanding the duel, she just zaps Mendo instead, making Ataru the class president. Over the next few days, Lum keeps appearing in Mendo's head when he is trying to meditate, and the next time he parachutes into school, she accidentally lands in his arms. They both land on Ataru and Shinobu, who are having yet another fight in the school's courtyard. Their next school activity is outdoors class in nature, and before class begins, the students are encouraged to relax for a while and get to know each other. Mendo walks over to Lum and Ataru and asks Lum if she would accompany him into a cave he found. Lum wants Ataru there as well, and knowing what happens between a boy and a girl in a dark and scary place, Ataru votes to invite Shinobu along as well. The group is now in an awkward position where in the event of a blackout, Ataru wants to cling to Shinobu, Shinobu wants to cling to Mendo, Mendo wants to cling to Lum, and Lum wants to cling to Ataru. It's a love square. After a quick huddle, Ataru and Mendo work out a strategy. They come upon a fork in the cave tunnel, and Mendo's light just so happens to die, leaving them to scramble in the darkness, finding a partner and splitting up. The flashlight comes back on, and it turns out that Ataru ended up with Lum, and Mendo ended up with Shinobu. The girls are thrilled about this development, but the boys are noticeably grumpy. They meet back up, come upon another fork in the road, try the tactic again, and this time the girls end up together, and the boys are even grumpier about ending up together. While they are trying to find the girls, Mendo's flashlight dies for real this time, and before they can fix it, Mendo starts crying in panic, revealing that he's afraid of both the dark and closed spaces, turning into a complete crybaby now that the girls aren't around. When the girls find them, Mendo snaps back to his normal flirtatious self, and they try finding the exit. After running into a dead end, Lum gets impatient and starts blasting her electricity to illuminate the tunnel, which activates a buried rocket nearby, launching it through the roof into space, leaving them a giant opening to climb out of. A while later, while our group of misfits is playing a match of tennis, a little bit away a group of small anthropomorphic crows is carrying a space pod through the forest, complaining about the launched spaceship. A tennis ball hits them from nowhere, though we obviously know where it must have come from, and they accidentally drop the space pod, which starts sliding down the mountain at increasing speeds, launching itself off a hill and landing in the tennis court, where it crashes on top of Mendo. The four students gather around the space pod, noticing a sleeping girl inside. The crows catch up to the pod and begin explaining that within it is their princess Kurama, who has traveled to Earth in search of a mate. Because their home planet has no humanoid males, only females, tradition dictates that the princess is to be awakened by a kiss, and the boy that kisses her will marry her. Noticing that Mendo is the princess's type, the crows start pressuring him into waking up the princess with a kiss, but he stalls because he's such a gentleman, which is the delay Ataru needs to get in and kiss the princess. Princess Kurama wakes up, lays her eyes on Mendo, and believes that he was the one to wake her with a kiss. Delighted that the crows managed to find someone her type, Lum meets the crows in secret, and she makes a pact to not tell Kurama who woke her up with a kiss with the lesser crows. The elder crow doesn't agree to this plan, but they just tie him up. Lum and the lesser crows try their best to prevent Ataru from telling Kurama who she is to marry and mate with. But Ataru and the elder crash the mating ritual between Kurama and Mendo at the last moment to tell them the truth. Kurama is confused because she likes Mendo and dislikes Ataru. So she asks the elder of the consequences of breaking tradition, but the elder does not know the consequences or why the tradition even is as it is, just that it is so. Curious, they build a projector to access the memories of their people and ask the previous crow elder about the consequences of breaking the kiss tradition, but the previous elder doesn't know. They go back generation after generation, but none of them know the reasons behind the tradition or what happens if they break it. So the current elder crow gives up and rewinds to the first elder crow and asks him about the kiss tradition. The first elder crow from 120 generations ago tells them the heartwarming story of coming upon a sleeping lady crow in a meadow after being attacked by a wild boar, and he wakes her up with a kiss. The lady crow was so impressed by him that they end up marrying each other. Kurama is furious that this stupid story is the reason behind the tradition and that there are no consequences for breaking it. So she storms off into the world to find her own mate to marry. Ataru and Mendo are disappointed in their own ways, but Lum and Shinobu are glad that their selected men are not mating Kurama. Will Kurama find her ideal man on her own? Will Lum stop harassing Ataru? Will Mendo stop pursuing Shinobu? Like this video if you're interested in finding out the answers, and subscribe to find out the resolution of this convoluted love story.